Hello my friends, this is Logan Jacob and I am finally back with another app review for you. I know it's been a little while and I apologize for that. It's been a busy semester as a teacher, so I'm finally on summer break and can get some more videos done. And today I want to take a look, if you have not gathered already, at the new BLEASS Phaser. This is a new app from BLEASS. It's been out for a couple of weeks now, and I know I'm a little bit behind on getting a demo tutorial video out. Some of the other great channels, Jamie TV and Gavinsky's Tutorials, have also put out videos as well. But I'm going to go ahead and do my best to show you from my perspective what this does and what I like about it. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that you notice when you open up the BLEASS Phaser is that it is absolutely beautiful. All of the BLEASS apps are wonderful, and if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I use them all the time. I use the reverb, the delay, the compressor, the filter, the shimmer verb, the chorus. I mean, I use them on almost all of my tracks using AUM and iPad OS. I think they are one of the best developers out there. Now, I also do need to, in full transparency, let you know that I did receive a code for this app to be able to use it and download it for free. And a big, huge thanks to BLEASS Effects for that. Now, there were not any stipulations tied to it or anything. They basically just said, thanks for using our stuff. Here's a code to get BLEASS Phaser so that you can make a video about it. So I'm not going to skew my opinion or anything like that based on the fact that they gave it to me. Even before they did that, I've been a huge fan of BLEASS Effects, and I think this one is wonderful as well. So I'm not really giving my opinion that much on this anyway. I just kind of want to show you how to use it and some of the cool textures and effects that you can get using the BLEASS Phaser. So let me bring back up the volume a little bit, and I'm going to solo this first channel. So what I've got going on here, I can't solo that channel. I'm going to mute these channels. I make that mistake in every video. So what I have going is I have Magellan Synth, and this is kind of an altered version of the Closing Up preset. You can hear there. And I have that being sequenced by Fugue Machine, another one of my favorites. This is a very simple sequence, just using 4 notes and kind of sending a bass line out into another instance of Magellan creating the bass. But the main synth part is all coming through this first channel, which I then have running into the BLEASS Phaser and into some reverb. And then I was using the spectrogram to kind of show what was going on with the phaser, but it didn't really show it very well. So maybe there's a better spectrogram out there you guys can point me towards. So let's talk about what this phaser is actually doing. So I'm a guitar player, and I've been using phasers since, you know, the late 90s. And they're cool effects. It basically, for a guitar pedal, acts like an automated filter, and I'm a huge fan of filters. I automate filters in almost all of my stuff, so I've always liked phasers. But in a guitar pedal, it's always been kind of limited to one little band that sweeps back and forth. What I love about this one is that you have all of these notches that you can add to create these really interesting textures and to move those around. So just to demo real quick what's going on with this one, I'm going to start off with the synth with no phaser on it, and then I'm going to add what I've used for this sequence, which is a version of the colorful preset that I've changed up just a little bit. I tend to start with presets and then modify them. So here is what it sounds like dry. And I'll even take the reverb off so you can hear it completely dry. Just a wonderful little Fugue Machine sequence there. Add a little reverb. And I'll go ahead and turn it up, and you can hear what happens when we add the phaser. So without getting into technical details about it, you can hear that it's just adds a little bit of motion and a little bit of character to whatever you're putting it on, whether it's a drone or some white noise or drums or a synth sequence like this one. You can add just a little bit of extra character. Now, technically, there's a lot of information, and Gavinsky's talked about it a little bit. Just to kind of give you a brief idea of what I understand is going on, there's an all-pass filter, and each of these notches is creating a point where that filter happens, and then the feedback is adding resonance to that. So if you have it negative, I believe that it's actually pulling that frequency range out wherever that notch is. If you have it positive, it's adding a resonance peak there wherever that notch is. I think that's what's happening. Don't quote me on that. But if you go down to just one, and let me take the stereo mix out of this so that they're together, you'll hear that it's going back and forth, that it's kind of sweeping through this filter range. Now, if I crank up the feedback, you can hear a lot more of a spike there. The color acts kind of like a low-pass filter in there as well, just darkening the tone some. Frequency, let me turn this down so you guys can actually hear me. The frequency knob controls where the center of that pole is. So if I take the, let me see, there we go. So if I turn off the frequency LFO, then wherever I put that frequency is where that filter is going to happen. And you can kind of hear it as I'm changing it myself, modulating the sound almost like a wah-wah effect or something. Now, if I just place it somewhere and then I bring in the filter LFO, you'll notice it start to sweep back and forth, and that frequency then becomes the center of it. So that's pretty cool by itself. What's really beautiful about this thing, though, is that it is really a multi-phaser. We can add all kinds of different notches in here to create our spectrum, to create how it's being filtered around. And then there's all kinds of options we can change there. So this notches knob here on the left, we crank that up, and you see that all these little notches start to appear, and we can go all the way up to 24. And I like how this spread works. They're kind of focused in the center, and then they fan out a little bit to the left and right. And if you increase this spread, it spreads them even further wider across the frequency spectrum. So if we do something reasonable like 12 and then spread it way out, you can see how all of these are sort of moving back and forth together across several different frequency bands. And that's what's being affected in the sound. So if I turn that on, it basically sounds like we have several filters being controlled by an LFO, but it's all within this one app, and it's saving us a lot of DSP. You'll notice up here that my DSP is doing fine. Granted, this is a fairly small patch, but if we had a bunch of LFOs running a bunch of different filters, it would not be working that well. So with frequency, we can change where the center frequency is. And then with spread, we change how close these notches or poles are to each other. And then we already showed you what the feedback does. It just adds a little bit more intensity to it. The color works as a low-pass filter to give you a little bit of a slightly different color there. And then we have two separate LFOs on the left and right to control how this thing is working. So the frequency LFO is controlling this knob. So it's as if we ran a patch out of this LFO into the frequency knob, but without having to do that, without having to go up, into the breakout box and look at all of the different things and add an LFO in there, which we could. You have control over a lot of those different parameters, but we don't have to do that because we've got the LFO built in there, so we don't have to add a separate LFO. That was brilliant of BLEASS to think of just including the LFO in the effect, and a lot of the BLEASS effects have that built in, which is wonderful. So we have a couple of options. We can do a free LFO, and I'm going to go back just to one notch so you can see how that frequency is working. So in the free LFO, it just shows us our hertz or cycles per second. 0.01 obviously is super slow, so it's really just slowly dragging along. If you're doing really slow ambient music that you want to just slowly evolve a drone around, that would probably be really cool there. And as you kick it up, you see that it starts going slower, or going faster and faster and faster. So 1 is 1 cycle per second. So it's kicking back and forth basically at quarter note equals 60. And then we can kick it all the way up into 10 hertz, which is pretty fast. And you can see it going bananas there. And Gavinsky did a really cool thing where he put it on some kind of crazy noise and added that really fast filter to it, and it created a lot of really cool stuff. I definitely recommend checking out his video. So that's the free synced LFO. So we're just controlling the cycles per second. We can sync it to the beat, and it pulls in the tempo, which in our case is 120 beats per minute at the moment, and we can set it as a ratio of that. So either 1:1, which is the quarter note, 2:1, which is like the speed of a half note, the speed of a whole note, 2 whole notes, 4 whole notes, and 8 whole notes. And then we can also do an eighth note, a dotted eighth note, some kind of triplet, and so on. But it's all in relationship to what's happening with our tempo, getting it all the way up into 30-second notes. So pretty quick, and that's useful if you have it creating kind of a rhythmic texture. There's some neat things you can do with it there. This stereo knob here splits the left-right channel of your notch. So if I bring the stereo up, you'll notice that they split apart all the way to where they're complete opposites of each other, which I think is really cool. That way, if you have headphones on, or if you're listening with a good set of monitors, you'll hear the different frequencies bending around within the stereo field, which I think is really handy. Of course, the stereo field goes the other way as well. -180 is just the opposite. It just sends them in opposite directions, but it's basically the same effect. And that's cool enough when we have one notch, but it really gets cool when we start increasing the notches there. And we can kind of follow it and see and hear what's going on. Of course, it has this beautiful animation that goes with it, as all BLEASS effects do. The shape knob up here, let's go back to one notch and we'll bring those back together. By the way, if you double tap or double click on the stereo, it brings it back to 0. So they're perfectly lined up. So the shape, the triangle wave is just even back and forth. It just kind of goes at a steady pace back and forth. The sine wave kind of slows down on the left and right. So you'll see it kind of speed up as it ramps up and slow down as it fades out, which I personally like. I think that's cool. It adds just an extra layer of the dynamic of the motion of what's going on there. So we're going to start, I want to play another example here. So we're using this same synth, And I'm going to start it just what it's doing now with one notch, and then I'm going to bring in several notch and split the stereo field. If you're not wearing headphones, I suggest putting on some headphones so that you can hear what's going on. So you can hear how those changing different knobs and parameters affect the sound. You can get some really wild stuff in there. Okay, on the other side, we have the spread LFO, which is controlling the spread knob here. So let's bring these back together. And this is controlling how close or far apart the notches are if we have multiple notches going. So right now I have them all moving at the same time. Again, we have the free or the beat. I didn't mention the amount. This basically is an attenuator to control how much of that LFO is being sent in. So, 8%, it's just barely wiggling back and forth. 50%, you're going to get a lot more motion back and forth, and 100%, it's all the way open. And the same thing with the spread LFO. So if I start to bring in the spread LFO, you'll see it start to bounce around a little bit. And if I completely pull out the other LFO, you can see it doing this kind of spread out and back in, like it's breathing almost. And when you really slow it down, you get this really cool breath motion there. And then changing the stereo from there, it again splits the left and right field so that the left side is moving at a different rate than the right side. Not a different rate, at different times, so that it's like it's two different LFOs controlling it at different times. And the LFO shape works the same as it does on the frequency. The amount, of course, works the same way. So this is doing all the way up, really bringing it back and forth. And here's what it sounds like. And with the feedback up, you can really hear kind of an over-exaggeration of what it's doing. It's a lot more subtle as you bring it back. And then we can bring in our frequency LFO. So it's bouncing back and forth and compressing, doing that kind of breathing motion, which is nice. And then the final thing we have control over here is our mix depth. This is how much of the effect is being sent into the signal. as opposed to, it's kind of a wet dry basically. And you notice that as you pull it down, the notches go a little more transparent. So if it's 100%, they're fully opaque. As you pull it down, they become more transparent. So you can kind of control how much of that you want going into your synth. So that's all the way maxed out 100%. And then I can pull it all the way out for a fully dry signal. And that mix is one of the parameters that is exposed here. So what I can do is I can go in and I brought up an LFO, and I know that the Rosetta LFO, the top LFO is channel 1 CC13. So I added that to this depth parameter, which is the mix, the dry wet depth there. And then if I turn that on, you can see this top LFO will control what's going on over here. So you can see it moving with this. So just another way you can add a little bit of motion to it if you really want to. All right, so one last thing that I want to show you with this is this random button here, the dice. Roll the dice, get a new sound, which is something I love for effects to have. I wish all of the effects had this. I am guilty of being a little bit of a preset junkie. I like to kind of listen and use presets. I generally believe that most of the people making presets are better at sound design than I am. So I use a lot of presets, but then I like to change them up some. And I also like to kind of see what happens randomly rather than me controlling all of the parameters. I like to roll the dice a little bit and see what happens. So let's just turn this on. And when I roll the dice, you'll notice all these different parameters are going to change randomly. And it's basically like adding a whole bunch of presets that you can then scroll through. And you can, of course, that one's pretty cool. You know, of course, you can change those up a little bit. That's almost like what we originally had going. So tons of options there, and just a way to create something new and interesting and figure out, you know, what kind of sounds you can explore, whether you're dialing them in yourself or letting this random number generator dial them in for you. It's always fun to see what's going on there. There are quite a few presets here. Gavinsky went through several of those. You can check out his channel and kind of hear what some of those sound like going through. I'm not going to do that here. I just wanted to give you an idea of how to use it, some of the ways that I'm using it. This was the first sample or patch, whatever, that I set up using this thing, and I basically started with the colorful preset and moved it around a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I will hopefully have more coming this summer now that I have a little more free time. Please hit like and subscribe if you will. I also do want to shout out all of my subscribers. Thank you so much. Since the last time I made a video, we've had almost 1,000 new subscribers. We're, you know, just maybe 80, I think about 80, 79 subscribers away from hitting 2,000, which is huge. I never thought we would get that far. So thank you so much. I apologize for my little sabbatical during the school semester. Hopefully I'll be able to get back on top of this and get more videos out. I have some ideas for this summer, and if you have any ideas, throw them in the comments. You know, find me on Instagram and Facebook and shoot me a message, and I'll be happy to chat with you about this stuff. Thank you guys so much, and Have a great afternoon. Remember, take these ideas, go and create something beautiful.